This is our first SBA Live episode in a year.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah, and I have never been on an SBA Live episode before.
That's right.
I've always been behind the scenes. So I guess for everyone who is not familiar, I'm Brandon Beck. I run sales and marketing here at Full Circle Aftercare.
Yep.
And Nikki's still here, still rocking it. She just doesn't really love being on camera. She much prefers writing.
That's right.
So we're going to try to let her do more of that this year and less making her be on camera. So today I had the idea to talk about direct cremation. You came into my office a couple months ago. What was this after?
I think it was after CANA.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, tell me the story that you shared.
CANA wanted to, they hired a focus group or a company that looked at 4 focus groups to kind of get some detail. And what they wanted is they wanted to look at the difference between families, direct cremation families who had services, and then direct cremation families who didn't have services. And they paid this company a lot of money to do it.
What things do we think they were trying to understand?
I think they were kind of trying to understand the mentality of the families, and then also I think they wanted to get some data around grief and how the families were healing afterwards.
Okay. And
so the company came back to them and they said, we can only find one focus group. And they said, what do you mean? They said, look, every single family, every single person we talked to had services. They just didn't have them with the funeral home. So they could not fill a focus group of even 20, 30 people who had done a direct cremation who didn't have services, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's not what we assume happens.
That's not what we assume. I think in the funeral industry, we think if they don't have services with the funeral home, that's it. They're just getting the ashes and moving on with their life. But in reality, what this focus group came back is that every family is having services. The thing that they're not doing is they're not doing it with the funeral home. So when I talk to a funeral home who's saying that 40% of their families, 60% of their families, 80% of their families don't want to have any services at all, they just want direct cremation, that's not true. What the actual fact is all of those percentage of families are having services, they just don't want to pay the funeral home to do it.
Yeah, and I think this brings up some really interesting insights. I think the first obvious question to ask is, why don't families want to have the funeral home just do that for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's probably a lot of reasons. We really don't know the exact reason.
Yeah.
But I think that they say, why would I pay the funeral home to do it? I can just do it myself.
Yeah, I think that DIY mentality.
That DIY mentality is a huge piece of it. I mean, a close friend of mine lost his dad. He's worked in the funeral industry his whole life. I asked him, is he doing a funeral? He's like, no, we're going to do a fish boil, right? We go down, we catch a bunch of crawfish and everything, and we do our fish boil, and that's how we're going to celebrate. And the funeral home can't do that for us. So that's, I think, the DIY factor.
See, I'm not sure that's even DIY. I think that actually shows, this example you're giving, this shows a mindset shift around what a funeral looks like. And I think there's a cultural shift happening where more people want the celebration of life.
Absolutely.
Instead of a traditional funeral service. And I think that thing for like the fish boil or whatever that might look like, a lot of those things, the celebration of life where it kind of is styled in the personality of the person who's passed, it's hard to imagine having a fish boil in or at a funeral home. That's not the venue for that.
Yeah, you would never do that in a funeral home, right? And so the question is it just the DIY, or is it really they're looking at a new type of celebration than what funeral homes have traditionally offered?
Yeah.
That we don't want the religious ritual that we kind of were such a part of our culture from before.
Yeah, I think about my dad, and he grew up surfing, and like surfing is so core to like what we did growing up in Southern California. He says like, hey, I want my ashes turned into a reef ball. And I think that like a celebration, like we might do, whatever the reef ball equivalent is of scattering ashes somewhere in the ocean, but you might also do that, just get the family together, have a bonfire, and that celebration of life, remembrance ceremony might happen at the beach where our family normally gathers in Southern California, and maybe not at a funeral home per se.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, my dad was very traditional. Picture my dad right there. And a pastor in our local church, our bishop in our local church. And so a funeral felt natural to us, right? So having that funeral. But after the funeral's over, the family got together. We had a big service project in the name of my dad, which was a time for us to bond together. And so even with the funeral, as important that it was, we also felt the need to do something more of a celebration of life in our own way that made sense to us.
Yeah. I think the other hard thing about this is I think the finances are something that you can't ignore on this, where
Absolutely.
Depending on who you're using for direct cremation, you're probably around $1,000 to $4,000.
Right.
And then, you might have a viewing or a visitation with that. You might not. But then for traditional service, how many more thousands of dollars are you normally adding on top of that? That's probably another $5,000. And so, if something wasn't prepaid for, pre-planned, and this is coming out of pocket for whatever family members are planning this, then it really forces me to wonder, okay, like how much do I really care about having a traditional funeral service when we're maybe already thinking we want this celebration of life that's something different. Well, and we're going to spend $500 on food and maybe like a park permit to get a location or whatever that is for the day. And hey, we're going to spend less than $1,000 and we can get something like, we can get really nice food for this.
Yeah.
Instead of paying a couple $1,000s to have the funeral home manage that.
That's right. I saw one of our clients in Ohio is doing a really smart move. So he ended up buying a building right next to the funeral home, but it's not associated with the funeral home in any way. And it's just kind of an event space.
Okay.
And he rents it out for all sorts of different events and things like that. So anyone who comes in for a direct cremation, he's pretty open with them and saying, hey, it's important to get family together. And they all say, yeah, we'll probably do something at the local bar, things like that.
Yeah.
He says, the only problem with that, someone stands up to make a toast. You got all these other people who aren't part of the group there.
Yeah.
And you might want something a little more private. So if you would like, you can use the place next door. We charge $100.
Yeah.
And so it's like super low cost. But then he says, but we just have to make sure the food company coming in is catered through us. So then he makes a percentage off of the food catering. And they have like 3 options, different companies who come in for a bar and for food catering. And he's making a ton of money off of that, but providing something for the family that they want. They just kind of want this private event that's not really tied to the funeral home. And so he's kind of, I guess, found that link of what is the family looking for? Just being open and honest with them. Yeah. What do you want? And can I provide a service that you might not think of like as a funeral home? Can I provide a service to make what you're already going to do much easier for you?
Yeah. So I think this levels up to the idea that what families want is changing. This is something we've talked about for a long time. Funeral service, goes 50 years back, is rooted basically in religious Christian traditions. America is becoming much more secular, much less Christian. And so our expectations around what we do when someone passes away are changing. The social norms, or cultural practices are changing there. And so the question has to get posed to funeral homes, at least who want to stay relevant, have a thriving business over the next couple of decades, is how are we going to change the services that we offer to match what families want? Because if we keep offering a bunch of services that families don't really care about, we shouldn't be surprised when people aren't buying the services from us that are optional, where, in every state or in most states that I know of, you have to have a license to take care of a dead body and either cremate, embalm, and bury. You need a licensed professional for that. And so other than like online direct cremation, people who are just doing like the online marketing thing there and subbing that out to other cremation centers, that's more defensible. But this piece where anyone can plan an event, anyone can go host everyone plans birthday parties for their kids. And it's not, I would say the process of planning isn't terribly dissimilar from planning a birthday party or a family gathering.
Yeah, absolutely. The interesting piece about this is when I talk to a lot of our funeral home clients, they're so concerned about those families who are doing the direct cremation and the loyalty from those families.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like those relationships are really one-sided. The families who come in for the full services, the families usually love the funeral home loves them.
Yeah.
But they're charging top dollar and like trying to do as little as possible for them in some cases. And then they're supplementing the direct cremation families. Those direct cremation families are not as loyal to the funeral home. And they're trying to give them more to get them loyal.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like this like needy girlfriend thing. Like, please like me.
What are examples of the things that they're trying to give them more of that are supplemented?
For example, we just onboarded a client in Michigan, and great client, but they're seeing more and more uptick with direct cremation families, and that's where they have their competition. All the traditional families love them.
Yeah, you've carved out that place in the market. You have that reputation and the relationship.
Yeah, and the established families, but you have more and more direct cremation numbers coming up, and that's where their competitors are, and that's where they want to be. And our aftercare is a great differentiator. Mm-hmm. Right? And so they wanted to give our aftercare to the direct cremation families and not to their full service families.
What?
Yeah. And I said, I just read this book called The Pumpkin Patch, where this guy wants to grow these prize-winning pumpkins. And as he's growing them, he realizes one of the ways to make the winning pumpkin is you got to cut off. As soon as that plant starts trying to do more than one pumpkin, which it's going to do, you got to cut it off, right? And I said, I would completely flip that on his head. You're not making any money on the direct cremation families. And instead, like, still obviously still have that out there, but make your services really great. And in fact, you should probably charge a little bit more if you're going to do an aftercare for the direct cremation that takes care of all their finances and truly fulfills a need that family doesn't have any access to get. Like, you can't DIY. You can, but it's very difficult to DIY all the next steps after an estate. Mm-hmm. And I said, that should be an add-on charge. Like, that should be an extra charge for those families, or a higher package that would maybe motivate them to spend a little bit more with you and make you a little bit more loyal. For the families who are already loyal, give that as a gift, have that included in there, and that's going to build upon the loyalty they already have for you.
Yep.
So the interesting thing here is like, we want to build that business for direct cremation, and I think if we want to build the business on direct cremation and traditional families, we have to relook at what those direct cremation families are actually wanting and needing. Yeah,
this is where the hockey saying, you have to skate where the puck is going, not where the puck is, right? And that's where, anyone who's looking forward to seeing that, these charts have been around for the last 20 years, that direct cremations are just on the rise, and that trend shows no sign of slowing down. And so how do we understand what those families want? And that might just be in an arrangement conference saying, hey, we can provide services. This is what they look like. Is that what you're thinking? And if someone says no, getting a little uncomfortable and saying, hey, if you don't mind me asking, I'm hearing a lot of people say that this is not what they're interested in. What are you planning on doing? I just want to understand.
Right.
And if you take it from that frame, like, I just want to understand your perspective, if you start hearing the same things, then you might say, great, how can we help with that? How can we start to get involved or make that easier for you? Because that's where people are willing to pay for things, is where you can solve their problems, make things easier. And they might that's maybe where you build the loyalty, and where you get these families bought in more, is where they see, oh, you did anticipate my problem. You understand me.
Right.
That person took care of something for me. I was actually kind of stressed about planning this event. And your approach, or the venue you have, or whatever it is, and maybe that's making partnerships with other venues in the city.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you do that, I think we get into this idea, direct cremation families just don't want to spend money. No, they just don't want to spend money on something that they don't want.
Yeah.
Right? Or they think they can DIY. So giving them options for those. And I'll give you a perfect example. We had a client out of Arizona that was online direct cremation only. And Arizona direct cremation prices are super low.
Yeah, it's
right?
like under $1,000, right?
Yeah, like well below $1,000. And so he's like, no, I just want a simple pricing, one price, and this is what we do. And I just begged him. I said, try a second package. Put my aftercare in it, right? Say, hey, this is direct cremation. This is all it is. It's bare bones, exactly what you're asking. It's the commodity, and we're only competing on price.
Yeah.
But a lot of families have needs with next steps. And if you want this extra concierge service, I think it was for them a few $100s more.
Yeah.
But for that price point, it was like 40% more.
Mm-hmm.
And in the first month, he just tried it out. First month, 55% of families chose the higher package.
Well, and that's an instant probably. I mean, I'm guessing, if he's paying us average 150 for each of those families on aftercare.
Right.
And even if he increases that by $200 or $300, it's in revenue, you might see what would that be? Maybe a 30 to 50% jump in revenue.
Yeah.
That probably means you double your profit.
That's exactly what he said. He said his profits were doubling on those families that chose that. And that's 55% of families that just doubled your profit.
Yeah. And that means that instead of stressing about winning more market share,
right,
you just double your profits without having to do more. So you don't have to do extra work.
Yeah.
That's an amazing place to be in. That's what you want to be.
Right. And so instead of him trying to supplement, right, like taking from the families who are already loyal to you and trying to supplement and give them just so that they please like you, I don't think that that's the right play with these. It's looking at Ohio situation where you're saying, you're going to do this anyway. I'm going to be the guy who makes this easy for you.
Yeah.
Right. So look at what their needs are, make it easy for them, or give them something of true value that they can't get anywhere else, because people want value. Yeah. Right. If the only thing we ever did was shop on price, we'd all just drive whatever the cheapest car is, Hyundai or Kias, right?
We'd all be in Ford Fiestas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we are not, because we want value. Even these direct cremation families aren't all driving Ford Fiestas. They're not. They want value, and so they're just not seeing the value we can provide. If we can start offering value to these families, they will pay for it.
Yeah.
Right? But they're just not seeing the value in the services that the funeral home provides.
Yeah. Part of this is kind of funny to me just because both of us are not funeral directors, and we're like, here's how you should run your business. And right. We really know, obviously, there are things that we haven't run into where we've never had to do an arrangement. We've never, had to get up at 1 a.m. to go do a house call, things like that. But
the nice thing is because we're vendors, we get to, I get to sit down with owners.
You see across.
From all sizes, right? Like I have my funeral home who's doing 40 to 50 cases a year.
Yeah, Southern Utah, rural.
Yeah, and I got my ones on the East Coast that are doing 4,000 or 5,000 a year.
Yeah.
Right? And when I'm talking to both of them, you see these common themes come up over and over again. It doesn't matter the size. It doesn't really matter the population. You're running into the same problems over and over again. And it's so fascinating to watch them find these solutions that are really helping them beat the market and grow their profits in an industry that's kind of having a tough time right now.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's been coming to mind as you were talking about, or as we're talking about how to skate toward the puck, is I think about, big events, funerals. The other big event in our lives is normally weddings. And, what do wedding vendors do? They all have relationships with the other wedding vendors, and your venue can get you discount for photos or a dress or a cake or whatever other things you need, rentals. And that might be where funeral directors are so involved in their community. That might be something that's really not that hard to do to provide values. Once you understand what are the kind of things that my families on the direct cremation side want or are planning for their celebration of life, their remembrance service, whatever that looks like, their funeral, even if it's not planned through me, great. How can I partner with other people in the community to get them discounts or make that earlier, or even build a package for them,
right, where,
I can still be involved, sell them something, offer something. I pull in other people's products or services, build relationships with them, build business, but then meet those needs without having to build everything yourself from scratch.
Absolutely. And look, people respect funeral directors. They do.
Yep.
It's just us now going to that next level of saying, I'm here for you, but I also have services that you want and need.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And getting out of the commodity business and getting out of this idea that there's only one way to do a funeral and that's not going to be it for me and I'm going to DIY, we're just going to go do a fish boil, but finding ways to still serve those families and do it in meaningful ways.
Yeah. I guess in that example of the fish boil, like how could, let's like actually try to solve it for this one. How could retroactively the funeral maybe have retained some of that business or guarded some of that, been involved there?
Honestly, I would love to hear comments from funeral directors. Like, I'm sure that there's been someone who's done a fish boil.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
I'm sure that there has been something.
It's just like you're organizing that, you're running the invites, or it's that kind of thing. You're creating the Facebook event.
Right. Or maybe it's like, hey, wouldn't it be nice to have some photos of that? And I can send someone out to do that.
Yeah.
Or, a little piece of memorabilia, something that you take away. I think that there are those types of things where it's kind of like that wedding planner idea. I have all these resources for you, and I can help you that and make that really simple for you. And the simple answer is if you can't find a way to do that fish boil, then maybe you don't. Like, maybe that's the pumpkin you cut off and say, I'm not going to event plan for every single person, but I am going to deal with the three things that everyone has to deal with when they lose a loved one: the body, the grief, and the estate. Mm-hmm. And if I focus on those three things, and I know every family has to deal with that, and every single family is going to struggle with those next steps.
If I nail all those, people are probably going to keep choosing me.
Yeah. So if I nail the body, I nail the grief, and I have memorial products and services around grief that are meaningful, and I help with the estate issues, I'm nailing it. And the event planning may or may not be there.
Yeah.
They might choose me to the event planning because I did such a good job with those other three things.
Yeah.
But no matter what, every single person who passes away, their family has to deal with the body, the grief, and the estate issues.
Yeah.
And if you're not touching one of those, if you're like, that's not my job, I only deal with the body, that's not the right call.
Yeah. And then you're not a solution, you're a product. Or that's what right. Is it? It's like this platform features. Yeah, you're not like the platform, you're not the solution, you're a feature at that point.
Yeah, good point.
Yep.
Good point.
So this is...
Ooh, I like that idea of being the platform for death.
This is very common, like the tech space when you're building technology, you talk about, are you building a product or are you building a feature? And this is something that, you think about if you're building a piece of like analytic software, maybe for sales, and it's like, hey, I want to go build something that makes all the documenting, like signing all the documents really easy on pre-need. That's probably a feature that you'd expect to be part of some platform, not the entire platform. And the platform is the person who owns the relationship that captures the most value.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like there's a difference between DocuSign and Salesforce.
Yeah, and Salesforce probably should have a native DocuSign built into it.
Yeah, they probably have that as a feature, but DocuSign on its own is just a feature, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't trust DocuSign with any other thing besides getting a signature on a document.
Yeah.
And they want more and more. They just sent me an email for next year, upgrade to, I don't know.
Well, Google's doing that for free now, too.
Yeah, exactly. I don't care about that anymore. But Salesforce or a CRM system, something along those lines, have all these features in it, and it's really that platform that I'm basing my business in.
Exactly. Yeah, so this, when you're talking about direct cremations, this is the other kind of interesting insight I wanted to talk about today, where we have seen a difference in how, when we're reaching out for our aftercare to full service or direct cremation families,
right.
The difference in engagement. And we even see a difference in how many people we can make contact with or pick up the phone.
Absolutely.
Where I've been heads down more on the product for direct cremation, which is really good about, and you should reach out to us and ask us about, where we're now, reaching out to families, going through the full checklist of estate issues, putting together a DIY guide for those families that tend to be more transactional, don't want people quite as involved, just kind of want to do things themselves. That's the mindset they're in. It's really interesting where on our full service side, we're able to get in touch with, you probably on average
90%.
80 to 90% normally, and we're seeing it's depending on the month, the client we're working with, it's like 40 to 60% on the direct cremation side with those families.
Yep.
And so this brought up an interesting thought for me of everyone that I've talked to about aftercare, and I would say it's been a lot of funeral homes that I've talked to about aftercare over the last 5 years. No one really distinguishes how they do aftercare depending on the type of family that they're working with, whether it is full service or a direct cremation. When we say direct cremation, we're talking direct cremation, no services, because the disposition of a cremation, but if they're still doing services, that indicates something different about values and what they care about, but not their like relational versus transactional approach to working with you. And so this is, I don't know, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. I think I only mentioned this to you like an hour ago, so this idea is totally fresh for you. What if funeral homes had a different approach on aftercare for direct cremations and full services? Financially, that feels obvious,
right?
But what are like the other implications? Are your thoughts?
So the thought that came to my mind when you kind of talked about like the engagement rate for direct cremation families versus full service families, we lost a bid on a big client down in Arizona actually, and I was talking to him a couple months later. We're still super friendly. So he went to one of our competitors who is an online kind of DIY checklist, and unfortunately it's about the same price as us.
Yeah.
But his whole thought was, well, the direct cremation families won't want as much help. They kind of want to do it on their own. So I'm going to do this online checklist versus...
If you told me that 6 months ago, I would have said, like, that's stupid. Everyone wants help. And the last 6 months of working on our more basic program, the Abide program, completely validate that.
Right. So the interesting thing is now he's super disappointed because he has to pay for the software for every single family. Right?
Yeah.
And they remind these families, like, I think 8 times. Like... In the conference, they send them an email, they send them
not the technology themselves. He is doing that already.
He is, them and the technology together are like 8 reach outs to plead with them to use this platform. And he's like, right now I would say we're maybe at 2% use rate, maybe 5% on a good month, right? It's like families are not, and that's just one login. That's not like using it all the way through. It's one-time log on just to look at it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, our typical direct cremation is around 60% engagement rate. And he's like, oh. So it's interesting because as he was trying to build his aftercare, he's like, oh, I don't want to be too invasive.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. But you do want something that's like meaningful, and I think the piece with that is it's just too you're expecting someone to go do it on their own.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest problem. The biggest problem is I don't want to do this. Right? And I do think that there's some mentality with that with direct cremation families. I just don't want to deal with this.
Yeah, where you're not getting maybe quite so involved with things as if you're doing a traditional funeral service.
Yep.
And maybe that's an aspect of denial, or maybe it's just, hey, my life is busy, I got a bunch of other things going on. And for some reason, like, I'm the one that has to deal with this when, like, I'm not equipped for this right now. I'm not prepared to do this.
Right. So even though we have a harder time getting hold of those families to try to get them help, there's a big difference being like, hey, here's this big binder of information, or here's this big software that you have to go and spend hours and hours in. That's even more of an obstacle in front of them. That is never looks like help to them.
Yeah, this
but if you can be there for 60% of the families saying, I'm going to take this off your plate and do it for you, and it's just kind of included in your package, that's huge. right? And then those families who say, I need actually even more help than this, then they can upgrade, and they do upgrade. We're seeing that they're upgrading to our full service on their own, but they kind of just needed to get started. So I think, like, for me, if you're expecting to get return on investment in an aftercare scenario for a direct cremation families, doing very, very minimal or expecting them to do any part of it is going to be even more of an obstacle, because with the full service, they see this as a relationship.
Yeah.
And direct cremation, I see as a transaction.
Yeah.
So when you send me a text message after my transaction, I'm a little annoyed.
Yeah, I don't know if every family's that way, but there's definitely going to be some families that are like, I don't have a relationship with you. Like, I just want you. We're not friends, right? Like, that might be the thing I think of, is like, we're not friends. I don't really know you. And like, you're not, like, this is my sphere of people I trust that I'm willing to be emotionally vulnerable with. And like, you're not inside of that circle.
Right. Exactly.
And that's not every direct cremation family, right? But
no,
for some, that's probably going to be the case for sure.
Well, and it's like a difference between, I was just out in Detroit, spoke out there, stayed at the hotel. I got like 2 emails and a text message from that place, like, tell us how we did and all these things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, you just fulfilled my need. I just needed a place to sleep for one night.
Unless there's brand loyalty, or it's like where I might do that for Marriott, because like that was the business school I went to, and it was the Marriott business school, and like all those things, like I might do it for Marriott. I'm not doing it for anyone else. I'm not doing it for Hilton.
I just don't care that much about the hotel I stayed in to want to build a relationship with them. I'm not going to go back to that hotel probably ever. Yeah. Right? Now, I have a contractor working on a project in my house. I just bought him a Christmas present. Right? Yeah. Because I feel connected to him, because we're working through issues together, and he's kind of solving problems, and I'm building a relationship. And I have that with like lots of other businesses I want to be with. So if someone's seeing you as transactional, if that builder sent me a text and said, hey, would you mind, I'm trying to get some referrals, would you mind posting something for me on Facebook? I probably would do it. Yeah. Right? If the Hilton in Detroit asked me to do that, no. Yeah. Not going to do it, right? Exactly. And I think that's the same thing. Like, sending a text message or doing something transactional to a direct cremation family isn't going to cut it. I don't think it's going to help getting a lot of return on investment for your business in the funeral home. Doing something that's a little bit more meaningful is going to be harder even still to kind of build that relationship, but that's your only chance. Once you build that relationship, the families who do use our aftercare, it becomes something that now they feel back connected to the funeral home. And we're seeing Google reviews and we're seeing word of mouth referrals from those families be like, it was amazing. I mean, I just I've got a good one that I did. I talked to a widow 2 weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago on Friday, and her husband just didn't come home one day, and the police later found him. She still doesn't have his cell phone, so she can't get in to start closing things, because we're having that conversation on the aftercare. I'm her, aftercare specialist, saying like, okay, like, let's talk through the list of next steps. And for her, like, you could tell English was her second language. She's from, probably somewhere in South America. And I say that well advisedly because I speak Spanish and she had a Spanish name. But you could tell, like, she spoke English pretty well, where she'd been here for, probably decades. Right. But I think even for that, there's still an unfamiliar with, like, this isn't the place I'm from. And I don't, I might not be super comfortable with how, like, all these things work that I've never had to do before, which I think people run into, probably even more so. Like, if we were in, like, Bolivia or Peru or Colombia and we had to deal with, like, the estate issues, even where we both speak Spanish, that feels super overwhelming. And so, she was like, yeah, I'm really confused. I don't know about these things. And, we went through our 15, 20 questions to understand the case. And most of those things on the checklist were things that she had to do. And, it's a great moment being able to say, great, I'm going to put together a custom estate closing guide. It has background information, what documents you need, next steps, step-by-step instructions on how to get all these things done. I'm going to email it to you right now. And for her, she told me, wow, that's just such a weight off my shoulders. I didn't really know what I had to do here. And I think us, me reaching out in the name of the funeral home, saying I'm part of the funeral home's aftercare team, that does give you the opportunity with that direct cremation family to nail that third piece of helping with the estate. And if you nail all three of those things, that is what can start to build a relationship and loyalty where,
it says like, oh, where you might send me a text message and say, how are you doing? It's like, you're not within my circle of like people I'm emotionally vulnerable with.
Right.
But if I serve you and help solve your problems, someone might start to let you in.
Absolutely. Right? It's going back, give me something of value.
Yep.
They might not see value in the other things. They are going to see value when you get back to those core problems that they're dealing with.